I am ecstatic about eating these puppies. There's an out route. Oh, it's picked!
Are you kidding me? It's a scrum in the middle of the field. And there's Gibson just pulling his way through that entire War Eagles defense.
On his senior night, Chaplin escapes. What a start with a touchdown. Leaning tower of pretzels.
Dive it into week 3 of the high school football season with Mark Covert. I'm Evan Budrovich. We have a fun matchup this week. Bishop McGuinness, Providence Grove. We have a private school matchup. Let's touch on the game we covered last week, though. Oak Grove, 3A, great running football team. They'd lost just 2 games in the last 2 years. West Forsyth, new quarterback, new running back, basically a new offense. And Mark, West Forsyth, after a tough first quarter, Riley Horton leads the charge. No more Cayman Chaplin. No problem. Here's the C.J. Blevins, 16 for 125, and they pound the football against Oak Grove.
Yeah, I mean, between Horton and Blevins, it was a two-pronged attack that I think we had expectations that it would be potent but not deadly. And we did see some deadly strikes between the two of them. Blevins really seems like a clone of Cayman Chaplin from which we saw last year in so many ways, and maybe even more impressive, because he seems like he has a little bit more of a burst, and that says something when you talk about the kind of running back that Cayman Chaplin is. But Riley Horton does bring a dimension to that offense that we had not seen, and that is the true running ability at the quarterback position. On top of that, provided some nice passing in the second half that allowed them to open up the offense a little bit more. The defense was tenacious all night. I mean, it was a really complete effort for the Titans of West Forsyth in a week where they had to be great, leading into arguably their biggest matchup of the season this week against the Weddington squad that's going to come into the Village and look for a 2-game winning streak against the Titans.
To your point, one, I thought the Village was awesome, right?
Yeah.
And we go to these places once a year, maybe twice if they're on the road. They had to wait till 8:30, 8:45 to get the game started, so you're an extra hour and a half later than usual. It was lightning like in the natural every 5 minutes, right? Boom, boom, boom. Mark and I are telling directors and ADs, hey, don't look over here to the right where there's lightning. Focus on this beautiful field. Like that was
right.
the elements we were fighting just to get a game in.
Yes.
And we're so fortunate the Raleigh market had to postpone their game. But so the game starts, and Oak Grove, this Carson Williams kid, he is electric.
Yeah.
So he gets the ball, boom, 40-yard touchdown. And right away, we're thinking they just got a fumble. They have an elite running back. This may be a 35-34 kind of game. But Turtle and that defensive line for West, Mark, and we touched on the Weddington game. If they're going to beat Weddington, if that defensive line can do the 7 sacks and what Eldridge was able to do with his 3 himself, that's their chance to beat Weddington this week.
Oh, it certainly is. But they've got to play a near flawless game if they're going to go and beat Weddington, even at home. You you talk to some people around the area, and there's some stipulation because you know what Weddington is. This is a team that's been a state champion. This is a team that has done all the big things and the big moments. If you want to get to where Weddington is as West Forsyth, this is a game where you can't just challenge them. You need to win. And you're going to be at home. You've got that advantage. They've got to come out with a purpose. And the one thing that we did see last week, we talked about all the good things. Defensively, offensively, they were spectacular. They have to limit penalties. It was the one thing that we kept going back to throughout our broadcast last week, saying, what if these penalties show up next week against Weddington? They're not going to win that football game. So as long as they clean that up, the Titans have a chance. I don't know how good that chance is, admittedly, but they're at home. They have an offense that can run the football effectively, and they have a tenacious defense. Traditionally in the game of football, if you have those things, it's a formula for success.
This year's offense to West Forsyth, and you touched on it, it's adopted the Wake Forest RPO attack because of Horton's running ability. And I tell you, in that second half, first half, I think Oak Grove contained it well. There was one big touchdown, but relatively speaking, but Hunter Cruz in that RPO, he'd get the slant and he went 75 on one touchdown. Now that's an element of their offense we didn't see from a 9-win team a year ago.
Right. And that's not even to point out that was the second touchdown for Hunter Cruz. His first one was streaking down the field, and Horton laid a beautiful pass over the top. So the passing elements of the offense are there. They have to continue to develop them. The only question is, how much are they going to develop them this week in a must-have game at home against Weddington?
So Weddington, for those who are familiar, not only have won 8 straight, they're the reigning champs of the state. They beat the number 2 team in the state, Providence Day, and held them to 1 touchdown. So this is a game where if you get double-figure points, you're in a great spot to win.
You want to be the best, you got to beat the best. That's exactly what it comes down to for West. Weddington is a powerhouse. Everyone knows that. If you want to arrive as West Forsyth as a program in the state and make a name for yourself, this is going to be the game where that has to happen.
In honor of the U.S. Open in tennis, Billie Jean King, the longtime legend of women's tennis, pressure is a privilege, right? That's her infamous line. I think that game is a game to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, let's touch on, we talk about winning streaks. We talk about the best teams in the state. Now, I've preached their choir for 3 weeks now. Sign me up for Mount Airy football. J.K. Atkins moves on from the program. They're a 2-time state champ. Ian Gallimore, who scored 60 touchdowns in his career, he's on playing in college now as a linebacker at Virginia Tech. And here comes his younger brother in at quarterback, and boom, they dominate East Surrey, their longtime rival, and Landon is fantastic at QB.
Well, who better than to take the reins and lead that program going forward? I mean, it's when you have the kin to keep that prestige going, and it can happen. That's special stuff. And to see Mount Airy do what they do, and we know Mount Airy football is, right? Like, this is a team, run the football down your throat, play great defense. It's the option. It's everything that makes you sweat as a coaching staff. But they do it so well. They do it so efficiently. And now you talk about a team that has yet another shot at a state championship. I mean, it is impressive for all the teams that we see throughout our season. We have Reidsville, the football capital of North Carolina. You have Grimsley. You have East Forsyth. You have all these teams. And then there's Mount Airy, just kind of like sitting up there in the corner by themselves. And they're making their name every single year. They do this thing over and over and over again. The model of consistency within the state right now has to be Mount Airy. And honestly, it's a privilege every time we go up there and see them play.
32 straight wins. And more impressively, they graduated the entire offense.
Yeah.
All 5 offensive linemen,
Yep.
Tayshawn Martin, an elite running back. We mentioned Gallimore. And then they come right back, and here comes his younger brother, Martin Jr., who has 3 touchdowns. I love the family ties. A lot of these programs have it. We'll see it with Bishop McGuinness this week. They have a twin brother receivers who were basketball players and are now football players. But that's the part of these games we love talking about every week.
Well, and think about how hard that is, especially at the high school level. Like, all 5 of your offensive linemen graduate. You're rolling 5 new bodies out there that have to move as one, as well as a new running game. And somehow the beat goes on. It just never ends for what they do. And it's impressive. But when you have those family ties, when you have those close connections, it is one of the aspects that truly does make high school football very special and different from the other ones, because you have those intimate connections within the community and it's so much closer. It almost is akin to minor league baseball in some ways, where you have that stronger connection to the community around you and whatnot. It's always special to see. And you and I love going to these places and seeing everything. And we're going to have a great time this week too, as well, when we go back to Bishop McGuinness for their matchup.
Speaking of places, Mark, it's the lone Catholic high school in this county, in the triad. It's Bishop McGuinness football. And you say, what is Bishop McGuinness, right? It's a program as a school. They've won 20 state titles in tennis. Their women's basketball program won 9 straight up until a few years ago, and they finally got dethroned. And then here comes a successful coach at multiple stops in the county, and he comes in, and now Oak Grove, fresh off a 500 year, they dominate with a 40 burger last week. Like, this is a program making the right steps, and you could see them really moving here in this new year.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun to watch. You know, I'll be interested to see how much they've grown since we saw them last year, where admittedly that they didn't play a great game when we saw them last time. And it's one of those things where you're learning, you're developing, and you're trying to get your players on the same page. But now it seems like they're in a much different place. And I think for us, it's going to be a lot of fun to see how they developed, how they've come along on both sides of the football. Don't get it wrong. It was offensively, it was defensively. You had those question marks. Another year stronger, another year, more together. You have that bond across the board. It's going to be a lot of fun for us, I think, to sit in the booth and see where this program has gone. Also owning one of the best nicknames in the state, by the way, is the Villains. You can't top that, man. If you're going to be on everyone's list, you got to be the Villains, and that's exactly what they are.
Yes, the Villains is a great name in honor of their old high school name that then became Bishop McGuinness, and we'll touch on that over the course of time. But that quarterback, Alex Waterfield, so last year he led the team in rushing. Yep. He's a 6'5", maybe 180 soaking wet, but I'll give him credit. And we met him at Media Day. He's put on at least 15 pounds, maybe 20 after you and I ate lunch from our friends at Mountain Fried Chicken. But he now looks the part, and he scored 4 touchdowns last week.
Yeah, no, it's a noticeable difference. I mean, when you walk into a room and people look around and they saw what you were before, and you kind of catch some eyes thinking like, that's the same kid. There's no way that's the same guy. No, it is. And that's where the challenge then becomes as you continue to develop is you've now gotten bigger and stronger and potentially faster. And for the guy who was a leading rusher last year for this Villains offense, looking more imposing, really, again, we talked about already, can't wait to see what they do. But offensively, it's going to be nice to see that dynamic on how much is he going to be utilized in the running game, but also throwing the football. I can't wait. I think this is one of the matchups that we go in and we know some about, but maybe not enough. And maybe this is an eye-opener for some other schools in the area saying like, hey, Providence Grove, hey, Bishop McGuinness, these are 2 teams that we need to talk about a little bit more. It's going to be a good matchup for our viewers.
Bishop McGuinness is in Kernersville. It's basically right in the heart of the triad. We mentioned the lone Catholic ties. What I appreciate, so the Pit is the home faithful here. They are spirited. They're smart. They remind me of the Duke student section where they come with pamphlets of trash talk for the opponent. And last year it was Providence Grove who got the 1-score win at their place last year. So I think I got to read these scripts because I can only imagine what trash talk is going to be said in the most respectful Catholic way possible.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's going to be a fun environment. We go to, again, all these different places and we see all the different things, and we love to soak in what those traditions are at each one of our stops. And it's going to be a good fan base that we're going to see, a student section that even amongst last year's struggles is going to be right there along with these guys. I know we're going to get some shots for the cameras and we're going to dive into that a little bit more. So it's, again, on the field product, off the field product, in the stands, what we see, it's going to be a great game for us to cover, again, to showcase these kids, these students, these programs in a way that they don't normally get that chance to. And I know we're all pumped for it.
Some clarification from last week. We show our Carolina Classic Fair fan section of the game. And Mark, you had asked on the broadcast, how many tickets do these kids get?
Yeah.
I have an update. The good news is any student in that section that gets honored, it's not a set number. So if you are a Bishop McGuinness student and you sit in the front 2 rows, you go to the game. So if you want to get a little closer, little wink, wink, inside baseball here, that's your chance to get a free ticket to the fair.
We're not trying to promote violence or anything like that, or aggression or anything like that. Maybe you should try to get into those first 2 rows if you want a free ticket to the fair. And trust us, we've been, and we're going to go again this year, of course. You want to get that ticket. You absolutely want to get that ticket.
October 4th through the 13th. That's my company line I have to read. The Carolina Classic Fair. We'll make it fun. Speaking of players who looked bigger at Media Day than we saw in the regular season, Jadon Blair for Mount Tabor. Now, he's a Notre Dame commit, and Marcus Freeman, what a big week for Notre Dame going to Texas A&M.
Yeah, also yoked, that noted.
So Jadon Blair and his Mount Tabor team, they played a really good Grimsley, number 3 team in the state. They were pound for pound in the first half, ran out of the juice in the second half. So they bounced back with a 40-0 win. But what stood out to me, Mark, and we'll touch on this, is the running game. So new running back, Jamarius Hunter, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. Snook Peterkin does his thing with another touchdown. They may not be in the upper tier of top 5, but you think about in the state, this is a team that could really make a run in Mount Tabor.
Very sneaky good team overall. Defensively, we know what Tyshawn Brown-led teams are going to bring to the table. They're going to be hard-nosed. They're going to hit you in the mouth on both sides of the football, and it's going to be relentless. And we see that every single week with them. Every time we've had them on Friday Night Rivals, they bring that passion every single down, every single quarter, every single game. So it's not going to go away. Mount Mount Tabor is not going to go away. And we promise you, by the end of the year, Jadon Blair, Snook Peterkin, and the boys are going to be right there where they need to be in the playoffs. And they're likely going to be in position to make some noise. They did the same thing last year, went on the road against a Mooresville team that was undefeated at that point, beat them at home. So this is a team, again, knows how to win in big spots, go on the road and do the same thing. They are going to be a team to watch in the area because they have that level of passion, aggression, and experience that all culminates into a team that has a chance to really make some noise as the season goes on.
Big week for Mount Tabor. They'll take on Page, another good team in the Greensboro area. And then the CPC starts, check my watch, next week. Like league play starts right now.
Yep.
I'm glad you mentioned Mooresville. Now, as we all know, Mark Covert lives in the Mooresville area. He's a Mooresville graduate. We believe, knock on wood. I'm just kidding. Of course, he's a graduate. He's a great standout, a Catawba graduate as well. You were part of a league championship team at Catawba, correct?
I sure was.
Part of that offensive line. So your Mooresville team, at least back in the day, they take on a really good Reagan club. And we know Josh McGee very well. We've had him multiple times. So we have some news to report, and it's been on social media this week, but all-state caliber quarterback, elite baseball prospect, and quarterback Jacob Smith is out for the year with an ACL injury. And injuries happen, right? And that's the nature of sports. But that program the last 2 years not only has had gut-wrenching injuries, they've had players transfer out. They've had matriculation. They've had kids move in the county. And Reagan, on one hand, disappointing to hear about his loss and Jacob's injury. On the other, what a fourth quarter comeback against a really good Mooresville team.
Yeah, when they had to have it, they were down 21-7 at halftime at home. And that's a gut check moment for you as a team that you have those big aspirations coming into the season that Reagan had, where they got through a grueling preseason schedule at the beginning of their year last year, which included a loss to Mooresville on the road. And then it helps them as they go down the line, even with all the injuries they had last year. Now, you go in, you're down by 14 at halftime. You come back and win with a furious comeback in the fourth quarter against, again, a Mooresville team that a lot of people look at as a potential state power. Great, awesome. We're on the right track. You know, we're right there. We get a great win, and then you lose your starting quarterback for the year. And that's the challenge for what Josh McGee has going up against. The plus side to that is this team has been there before, and they've dealt with these injuries. They've dealt with guys not being there. That's their challenge, but they have faced it before, and for the most part have come out on the right side of it. Now you have to find a way to rally around your back quarterback moving forward, but how do you complement him? Because he's not going to step in and take Jacob Smith's role and just run with it, right? You got to find ways to help compensate for that and help him out, kind of fill into that role. So running the football, playing defense, it's been the name of our episode tonight, right? That old school brand of football, but making sure that you're protecting that new quarterback in place of Smith is going to be crucial and paramount for what Reagan has those aspirations for the rest of the season.
It's kind of eerie and ironic how this all comes together. 2 years ago, Jacob Smith was a freshman. He couldn't drive. His father, who's a longtime collegiate football player and then played professionally with the baseball ranks, he filled in for Mekhi Purvis, who got hurt midway through 22, and then the last 2 years has played with gut-wrenching team injuries and disappointing losses. And now here comes, it's crazy to think, but a sophomore quarterback, Elijah Davis, who's a dual threat running back, quarterback, and Reagan gets ready for the CPC as well. I wouldn't count them out. I also know this team can run the football, so they're going to find a way to get things happening.
Yeah, and that's, again, where the bread and butter now has to turn to, where you're running the football with power. You're taking it off of Elijah as much as you possibly can. Let him move into that role and allow him to develop into that role without putting him in harm's way. And that's going to be the challenge for these players. That's going to be the challenge for the coaching staff, everyone moving forward. But, again, given the history of what this team has gone through injury-wise, if there is anyone adept at overcoming something like this, it is Josh McGee and his staff. We've seen it before, and obviously wish them all the best of luck, especially Jacob Smith as well in his recovery moving forward.
Lastly, we want to talk about big games this week. We've noted the Weddington West Forsyth game, and I think you and I both agree Weddington a heavy favorite, but I wouldn't sleep on Riley Horton making things happen. We touched a little on Page and Mount Tabor. I think that game kind of sits. I want to get your thoughts for Friday's game with Bishop McGuinness and Providence. It was a 1-point game last year. Providence, with a senior-led team, got the win. What are your thoughts for this Friday?
Last time we saw Bishop McGuinness, it was not being able to move the football offensively. It led to bad spots defensively, and they could not stop. They couldn't stop their opposition last year from scoring points. This year, we got to have a different ball game. And coming off what they did last week, a 40-0 win, this is a team poised to make some noise. This is their moment. On a big spot, on TV, you've got a chance to really put your name out there for what your program has done, what it's building towards, and what it's always been culminating towards. If the offense can move the football against this Providence Grove team, which is going to be a tall task, for sure, because they're going to come in playing with some confidence, even with a 1-1 record and a loss last week. They've got an opportunity, again, to make some noise and let everyone know, hey, Villains are here, and they're not going anywhere at this point in the season. But if they can move the football, that's going to be a big testament to what they can do, and it's going to put them in a great position to win a game at home.
One, the matchup of Patriot and Villain. Like, if that's not a Stephen King movie script, I don't know what is. So we'll be touching on that all night. Two, so Providence Grove 1 win, Southeast Guilford. 4 interceptions defensively. Yep. And they held their opponent to 13 points, forced a bunch of turnovers. The following week, a tough loss, but they forced 2 fumbles. So this is a defense that's going to make some plays. I think the difference maker this year is the Grave brothers. Patrick Graves, and he's joined by Nick Graves, or Nicholas. And so Patrick and Nick, they're both starting linebackers. They're both starting receivers, and they're the point guard and shooting guard on the basketball team. Now, if that's not a One Tree Hill script with Lucas and the Scott family coming together, and Nathan Scott, I don't know what is. What I will say is those two guys were battling injuries when we saw them against Davidson last year. Yeah. I think they make a huge difference. In that game last year, there was a lot going on. 3 offensive linemen ruled ineligible the day of the game. Like, that team was gutted on the O-line, and then Davidson was a team that made the 3rd round of the 2A playoffs. They were really good. I think that combination put them in a tough spot. This year, though, I'm going to roll with you. This is not first take. We're going to pick the same team this week, and I'm picking a big win for Bishop McGuinness.
Yeah, I think Bishop McGuinness takes care of business at home. Again, tough spot last year against a really good opponent. Now this year, you've got a chance again. What are you going to do when the lights are the brightest? We got a chance to see what the Villains and the Patriots are going to do. I'm looking for a show. I think we're going to have a really good game here in 2 days on Friday Night Rivals.
Lastly, we want to highlight the 3 standout players in the triad. This is 2 weeks in. Some teams have played 1, some teams have played 2 games. We're going to stay offensive this week because Mark played offense and I played defense. He won the coin toss. That's how we do these things. So quarterback-wise, there are state leaders. Troy Logan at Charlotte Latin High School. It's an independent school. He leads the state in passing. But here's Bryce Baker at number 2 in the state, which is not a surprise. He's a Carolina commit. But Mark, he's averaging 300 yards passing a game. And I don't care where you're playing, how you're doing it. These are impressive numbers for Bryce Baker.
Showed flashes all last year. And the couple of matchups that we saw, we started thinking, man, if Bryce Baker can really tap into that potential, unlock that and take that next step, he's going to be a special player to watch. And he's put it all together so far this year. What a phenomenal kid, what a phenomenal football player. And he's going to continue to get better as time goes on. Carolina better hold on for dear life if they want Bryce Baker to make sure that he's still going and representing Carolina in that nice Carolina blue. He's going to be a special player, and there's going to be a lot of schools that are going to covet him going forward.
Yeah, one of the top seniors in the state and one of the top quarterbacks in the country coming out.
Yep.
Running back-wise, trust me, folks, this is not the Jalen Moore weekly special, but I do have to bring up who is the leading rusher in the state of North Carolina. 460 yards later, it's Jalen Moore for High Point Christian.
At ho-hum. That's exactly what it is, ho-hum. I mean, since we saw him last year break onto the scene, he's been a dynamic playmaker out of the backfield, a guy that can run, obviously, with much speed, much elusiveness, but power as well for a smaller frame guy. He's just been dynamic. And again, the beat goes on. This is another guy that we expected to be great. He has been great and is doing it at a level that is borderline unprecedented. So, again, Moore is doing everything that he can for that offense. And expected as such.
Lastly, I want to touch on one kid who's in the county and one kid who's out of the triad, just barely. So Southern Nash, which is outside of Raleigh, kind of in between Wilson and the Raleigh area, he has 9 touchdowns in 2 games. This elite running back, Tyleek Martin. So he's the state leader in touchdowns. That's our honorable mention. Third and finally, how about a local kid in the area, Mytred Curry? He plays for Walkertown. And we've been to Walkertown over the years, but 350 yards receiving in 2 weeks. He has multiple touchdowns. Walkertown's a program that's had good years and bad years, but right now off to a great start because of this elite receiver.
Well, when you have a guy like that at the high school level, it makes a world of difference. When you get that one receiver that can stretch the field but can make those underneath catches, go across the field into traffic, he handles his business every single week at that wideout spot. And you don't go into the first 2 weeks averaging almost 400 yards, not averaging, but having almost 400 total yards. It's impressive. And Walkertown, like you said, is a program that's always kind of searching for some consistency. They keep this up and they start getting those guys rolling. Watch out, because Walkertown is one of those sleepy places where if they get on a roll and get some confidence, they're going to be a dark horse pick for some people, and they're going to be very underrated once the season rolls on, and they might be finding themselves in some playoff contention because of the play of their offense and the receivers.
Walkertown at 2-0, and they have a good matchup against Forest Hills, who in the 1/2A, Forest Hills has gone to the 4th round. They've been to a semifinal before. Like, that's a game. We didn't circle it in the open, but I'm keeping my side eye, right? Like, I have my main eyes on the Bishop McGuinness game. I'm peeking over to the West game against Weddington. I'm keeping tabs on Mount Tabor as they play Page, and then my side eye is kind of glancing at Forest Hills and Walkertown.
Just, you got to be alert. And again, such a crazy area, especially this time of year where you have these out-of-conference matchups from different parts of the state. I mean, again, Weddington's coming all the way up from south of Charlotte, down near the Waxhaw area. So this is a drive for them. This is going to be the last real week we're going to see some of these matchups. So it's chaotic. It's that time of year where upsets abound. You don't know what's going to happen right before you go into conference play. So gut check time for a lot of these teams. And there's a lot of exciting matchups in the area.
Mark Covert, always fun, my friend. And hey, how about in Georgia high school football? We saw the double pass with the offensive lineman throwing a 50-yard touchdown. It's
a thick 6. I don't care if we're running it. I don't care if it's a reception. I don't care if it's a defensive touchdown, fumble recovery, pick. A touchdown pass counts as a thick 6. You can't tell me nothing. No one else can tell me nothing. That's it. That's under discussion. We had a thick 6, and it's beautiful. What a time to be alive. We're all invited to the party. Let's go.
Let's hope for the folks at FNR and Bishop McGuinness and Providence Grove. If we get a thick 6, Mark, you just take the lead. I'll kind of follow suit on those touchdowns.
I'm running on the field. You can forget the booth. I'm running on the field if there's a thick 6. I'm celebrating.
Oh my gosh. For Mark Covert, I'm Evan Budrovich. My 48, as you saw last week on our YouTube channel and Facebook, there were hundreds of you viewing on multiple platforms. So we really appreciate it. 7:30, we promised this time. Weather looks good. Bishop McGuinness, Providence Grove. We'll talk to you guys next week.
I am ecstatic about eating these puppies. There's an out route. Oh, it's picked!
Are you kidding me? It's a scrum in the middle of the field. There's Gibson just pulling his way through that entire War Eagles defense.
On his senior night, Chaplin escapes. What a start with a touchdown.
Leaning tower of pretzels.
Oh!